all these economic studies that talk about retaliation. In fact, I think anyone who's intellectually honest and does a study down the road, be it the ITC or anybody else, will be under all that pressure to consider that aspect, not just how it affects the affected industry, how it affects users of the product, but also what the likely results are. We have good metrics now. We know what retaliation looks like. We've been dealing with it for a year. So I think there's a good set. That would probably be the right way to look at it. That those numbers get very serious very quickly. So it creates sort of a little bit of a skew against taking any action like that. The other thing I would say is keep in mind that Senator Grassley is from an ag state, and so and he's not the only one. So I think there is a lot of what's driving this 232 reform is pressure from ag. They have clearly borne the brunt of the retaliatory tariffs, and everyone who works in an ag district will tell you it's not good times. Uncertainty, farm incomes are depressed, record bankruptcies. I mean, this is not the sector that we want to be hurting right now, but we're hurting them gravely. And I think that the senators who represent those states where ag is really significant, they're the ones who honestly, very quietly, are kind of lining up behind this because they just want some of this to go away. And they feel like if they get this reform, they can at least try to convince the White House to sort of lift some of these tariffs.
So while I take your point that, yes, there's been productivity gains and that accounts for some of the manufacturing employment declines, having been in and represented U.S. producers for many, many years, I can tell you that those idled factories, those workers were some of the most productive and efficient in the world, and those factories are sitting idle, not because of productivity gains, because of unfair trade and excess capacity. To your other point, the Bachman model that Stacy's talked about, when we've examined that model and corrected their model for the economic flaws, which does take into account the retaliation, it shows that there's very little to no effect at all downstream. So I think you can have that discussion, and even when we're talking about the steel safeguards back in the Bush administration, when the ITC did its analysis, it showed very little to no economic effect. So these are things that the administration examined, they looked at, and they made the right conclusion in our estimation.
In terms of the retaliatory tariffs, if we move forward with autos, I mean, yes, it seems obvious. I don't think that our trading partners around the world are going to sit by while we continue to sort of upend the global trading system, and that leads to a larger concern. I think that this sort of what the United States has put in motion is quite destabilizing on a global basis. In terms of national security, as we continue to threaten our allies very aggressively, and to treat our allies in a way and our trading partners in a way that they've never been treated before, we are creating ill will. We are creating confusion. I was over in Europe speaking about, is globalization dead? I mean, people are seriously concerned that we are headed down a path that will be difficult to recover from. And it's, and I don't say that lightly. We are putting this administration's actions are putting other world leaders in a very uncomfortable position where they're trying to thread the needle because they don't want to cause even greater economic harm to their own sort of domestic economy while reacting to what the United States is doing. And, at the same time, they're dealing with their own domestic politics. They're dealing with their own constituencies who are distressed and, frankly, really pissed off at being treated this way on a global stage. And the repercussions of that are very long-term. I mean, look, different countries feel differently about administration to administration. They like this president, they don't like that president. But this is fundamentally different. It's really filtered down to the domestic industries in other countries and to the population in general. And talk about a threat to national security. We are really undermining sort of global goodwill and the need to work together for very large issues where there's a lot of commonality between the United States and its traditional friends and allies to deal with problem zones in the world. And part of that is because leaders who we normally rely on in other countries find it difficult to do that because they're so poorly treated on the world stage. And their constituents don't want them to cooperate with the United States and collaborate with the United States because of how their country is being treated. And I think that's a bigger issue that we need to have a discussion on, because that is it could possibly take a long time to recover from that.
One last question and one comment. I mean, I think anyone who's negotiated with the EU and USTR or Commerce would say it's a dead certainty that they are going to retaliate. I think the early number that I saw was 300 billion.
They have a list. They have a list. Yeah.
And
They're all on it.
it's got to be a very, very long list. Well, there wouldn't be very many exports left, but it would also be targeted at Trump's base. So you have to ask how this would affect his chances in 2020. But last question?
No, I think that was the last question and the last comment. We try to be prompt here at WITA. Thank you all for this discussion. Robert, sorry for putting you so much in the hot seat there, but we do like to, as folks know at WITA, we like to have all perspectives reflected, and we are very grateful to you and all of you, Stacy, Vanessa, Robert, and Warren, for joining us this morning. Thanks all of you for sticking around. We look forward to seeing you. Hope you'll come out for our U.S.-Japan trade event next week. We have a fantastic panel lined up for that one. Thanks all.